Welcome back, everybody. We are on build series 2, day 2, and this I think is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like the 6th video for today on this on the Vattera twin hammers. I started at 1 o'clock this afternoon, and it is currently 5:30. I just finished putting on another coat of paint in between intermission. And we're going to work on this differential, and which we are going to be avoiding all that stuff. We're opening up bag C, bag C1, and we're going to dig out some screws and some bearings. Looks like we need 4 M2 10 millimeters and 2 10 by 15 by 4 millimeter bearings. Alright, so let's dig into that. And before we do that, I guess, nice little handy spot here about differential oil. General use, this is if you got an open front differential, 500,000 weight or less. General use and some crawling, 500 to 1 million. Crawling and some general use, 1 million. Crawling only, locked. And we have that in different languages as well. Alright, parts bags. Let's start the digging. Okie dokie, did a bunch of digging, found the correct corresponding bag, bag C1. And there is our differential locker. That big 4-way block there. And you had a good view on it from the beginning, and I messed it up. You can see the little groove, barely. That's where it locks into the pin on either side. Our bevel gears that we won't be using. Outdrives. Front differential case, the A-arms, and the outdrive going back to the transmission. Alright, let's open up these guys and get this thing built in no time flat, hopefully. And we're back. Have all our parts laid out, all our parts that we're not going to use, which are the bevel gears and the planetary gears here. And these little rods, we're not going to use those. I'm going to put those off to the side somewhere else. Everything kind of laid out, differential cup, or outdrive, bearing, differential cup, O-ring washer. The pin is sitting here, the 4 screws for the differential cup are sitting on this magnet so they don't roll away on me. Our locker, our other stuff, our gasket that goes around the ring gear, the other bearing and the other outdrive, lots of moly grease, and then our 4 screws. So we will start on this end and work our way to this end. Alright, so we got the first bearing installed on the end of the differential cup. I put some moly in between the bearing and the cup there. You definitely have to apply some pressure, nice and even, when you're sliding this down over top of this cup. Very tight fit. And there's a little lip on this bearing. You want the lip on the inside by the differential cup. Our next step is going to be taking this heavy-duty outdrive. Look how thick that bad boy is. Impact socket material. Said before, that's heavy duty. We're going to take that, slip it through here, put a little bit of moly on it first, put this O-ring on, this washer, and then that other little pin there going through it. So I'll try to do this step by step. I'm just going to lube this up, slip it through, and flip it over, and then put that O-ring and washer on the other side. Alright, so I put that little O-ring in there. I put a little bead of moly down in there first before I put the O-ring in, and I put another small little, just kind of slime the top of it with it before I install that washer. No, this part isn't going to be spinning. This whole differential cup is going to be spinning as one unit. So really the only thing that's really going to be spinning is the bearing. So for the most part I'm just putting the grease in there just to keep the elements out. Alright, so that's all slid in there. When I was sliding that in, I used my angled needle nose pliers and just kind of spread the gap there across the 2 points on that washer as I was inserting that shaft into that differential cup there. And just to kind of keep that washer flat with the O-ring so you can slide it all down without having anything like, you know, kicking off from one side or the other. Before I did that, every time I tried to push that through, it was pushing the O-ring out and the washer didn't want to sit on, so I just kind of put everything down in there, got everything centered, and then started feeding it through, and then put the pliers on top of it and pushed it up through. Last thing to do on this little portion is to install this little pin. Once again, going to use the needle nose and try putting that little guy in the hole. Where's it at? There it is, right there. You can barely see it. I'm going to line it up with one of these little cross grooves here so I have a little bit more room to work with. We'll get that in, and then we'll jump to the next spot. And that is all together there. Moving on. Actually, we can install this differential locker if we want to real quick, which is stuck on the magnet there. Once again, you want to get this little pin here lined up even with one of these grooves so you can fit it into the corresponding groove on the locker there. And it's not quite 50-50. It looks like I could probably slide that pin a little bit to the left. Alright, we are back. The pin is slid slightly to the left. We got try to line up this thing with that thing. Drop this into the groove, and bam. Good to go. Now we just have to mate this up with the driver's side, and we'll be all set. So now we just kind of need to repeat this process, except this time we're inserting the cup into the bearing, into the ring gear, gasket, O-ring, washer, pin, outer gasket, 4 screws, joined to the differential cup. We'll start somewhere here. Step 1, bearing installed. Once again, I put a little cushion of Moly or Team Losi high pressure black grease. In case you're wondering why I keep calling it Moly, high pressure black grease is kind of the same thing that they used to use on weed whip shafts, because there's like a cable that goes down through the shaft of a weed whip, you know, for spinning the whip head. And they use the same kind of grease in there because it's like high speed, high temperature, high pressure grease. And that appears to be the same stuff. Just by sight. Don't know for sure, so don't quote me on it. So we got that installed. We're going to slip in this other outer. I'm going to put a little bit more Moly around this edge here before I install that. And continue on with this stuff. Alright, so ring gear. Outer drive cup there, bearing, a little bit of Moly in that down in that pocket there, so that O-ring will be have some element resistance there. Alrighty, well that was a little bit challenging getting that to compress down in there. I had to use this pair of needle nose pliers to come down over top of this washer and push it down like this on either side of that pin, while using that pair of needle nose pliers to feed the pin into the hole. FYI. So that's together, relatively centered. We're going to slap the gasket on there and install this whole little bit of stuff here, and it's stuck to a magnet. Awesome. At least I know it's not going anywhere. Quit rolling away. Yep, stuck to the magnet again. All right, gasket. What's going on here? We will line up the holes in a second. Should probably get a couple screws through it. Alright, so before we install this is going, the little crosshair there is going even between these two holes, which it's got a screw into, so I made sure that this is relatively even between these holes so I can kind of square it all up before I put it together. So I'm just going to drop that onto there and start running some screws in. Pretty direct fit. Alright, we got everything mated up. Started installing the 4 screws. Just need to tighten these guys down. Don't go crazy tightening these down. You're just putting them into a plastic cup. As far as quality control goes between this plastic cup on the Vattera and the WL Toys, I really didn't notice much of a difference between the plastic cup on those two. The ring gear, yeah, there's definitely a difference on the ring gear. That is definitely a little bit more industrial grade, let's say. It's pretty solid. The WL Toys ring gear that was in my WL Toys, not speaking for everyone, but mine personally, it was more of a chrome colored ring gear. I'm too sure. Is that straight or does that look like it's got a little bit of a curve on that ring gear? Kind of helical. And I think the WL Toys is pretty much straight up and down, like ring and pinion straight up and down. This one's got a little bit of a helical cut to it. Everything's kind of curving to the right, up and to the right. Just observation once again. Alright, so time to tighten down these screws here. Alright, we got that guy all put together. Everything's all snug down. You don't have to go crazy on those. You know, you want them tight, but you know, don't go nuts. Yeah, that might be more heavy duty or stronger than WL Toys. Because I was almost thinking that I was going to be stripping out the screws if I snugged it down, but I could see how you could strip out a screw before the plastic. Just because it's such a small head on these Allens. Real micro. Alright, so we are moving on here. Turning the page once again. Optional locker. Yeah, that's telling you what we just did. We just kind of avoided all that, or we avoided all these gears and put the locker in instead. But there's the instructions for what we just did. So we're moving right on past that, moving right along. And we are going into this center drive shaft here, which goes from the main transmission up to the front differential. Let me gather some goodies for this guy. Alright, once again, they're not really telling you what bag to go to on any of this. But here we are, bag C. C2221. C2 differential halves. See my drive shaft right down here is what I'm digging for. That is what we're looking for. Do they have all the contents inside? It sure looks like it. All in one. Huh? I like that. Alright, let's cut this guy open and lay this out and start assembling. Alright, so that is the contents of bag C2. We got our little pin, the little sleeve that goes through the end of the drive shaft. That is that little teeny weeny micro set screw that slides in the end of this little drum here that holds the pin that goes through this whatchamacallit thingamabobber right here, the drive shaft. So we will start assembling that, hopefully not making the same mistakes that I did on the front one. Alright, so I put a little bit of Loctite on that set screw and I started feeding it into that drum there that we're going to put through the end of the drive shaft before putting that little pin right there through, which we need to feed through this cup here, and then install the spring retention to keep it all in check. Before we do that, we're going to have to crank down this Allen key again, because when you tighten down this Allen key, it kind of sandwiches that pin in between here and keeps it from walking left or right. So we're going to slide this through the drive shaft, put the drive shaft into here, put the pin through here, retighten everything back down, slip the spring on. Alright, so that is slipped together. That little shiny spot is that Allen set screw. I haven't put the spring on yet, but I need to tighten down that little set screw there. Like I said before, I think if you had an Allen wrench, you could probably go right through that little hole and into the set screw and get a nice straight shot on it. I'm using my driver, so I'm probably going to come in from an angle. And yes, just for craps and giggles, you can go right through one of those little side holes and get direct access to that Allen key. Just so everybody knows. Alright, so I tightened that up going through the little side hole, and now the next step is to slip that little key ring slash spring on and gently work it around the edge of this and to keep all that stuff in check. It's pretty easy to do. And the spring is on. I mean, that is really easy. Literally less than 10 seconds between me hitting pause and picking the camera back up. So that's on, it's all together. And we are ready to move over to the next page, which is, I'm sure, going to be assembling this whole deal. Well, they're probably going to have us put the pinion bearing in there and the pinion itself. So we'll flip the page and see what's coming up next. A real page turner. Yep. Got our bearing, pinion, ring and pinion, or ring, pinion, black grease, differential, 4 screws. And this is definitely a helical gear versus WL Toys is not. WL Toys is straight cut. Straight gear here. It is on an angle, but it's straight. The teeth are going vertically. And same with the teeth on the ring gear. They are vertical all the way around like a clock. Whereas these are helical. They're kind of curved a little bit. And you can see it right there on that one. That's got the curve to it. Alright, so we'll dig up some bearings and we'll start slapping that into that case, the front half of the case, which is over here. This is our guy that we're looking for. Or our girl, I should say. Alright, let's dig up some bearings. Alright, so we are back. We got everything we need and more. These pins here are for those A-arms and some other hardware here, so I'm going to put this over on the magnetic tray. Way over yonder. We need the differential stuff. Excuse me. Nice piece of aluminum there. This is the little keeper that goes on the front right up here. That basically just keeps the A-arm pins in place. And this appears to be, well, probably the same diameter as a WL Toys, but once again, just better plastic in general, I think, on this piece. I mean, you're starting to get to such a small piece where it's so thin, you know, that it's still going to give, but that's still, yeah, that still has a lot more strength than a WL Toys. WL is very rubbery. Like a Rubbermaid garbage can. And WL uses a thin piece of aluminum. This sits right up here on the front across here. And those A-arms pins slide through there, and then that keeper goes on top. That's this piece right here. WL uses a piece of aluminum. This is a piece of steel. And it's, I don't know if it's the same diameter or not. It might be just a pinch thicker than the WL as far as actual thickness or diameter of it. But it's definitely stronger because it's steel versus aluminum. So just FYI, a little comparison there. So we're going to start putting this together. I got my 2 bearings sitting over here. I'm not sure where I'm going to be using these aluminum parts just yet, so I'm just going to put all this stuff over into the magnetic tray as well. Along with this little plastic keeper there. And this is mainly what we're going for, the ring and pinion, this drive shaft, the differential, these 2 bearings, these 4 screws which screw the front half of the differential on, and then these 2 small set screws that are just resting up against the side of the magnet. Those are going to be going into either side of this drive shaft coming off the front differential. So first things first, we'll slap these bearings in, and as always, I'm probably going to squirt some Molly into the sockets down there. I'm going to lube her up before I slip it in. Stand by. Alright, well, I put a little bit of grease on the inside of these cups before I slip the bearings in there, and this is the last bearing to go in on this half, which is going in sideways. Oh, there she goes. There she goes. She's in there. Alright, now we're gonna have to put a little bit of lube on this guy here too before we slip it into the bearings. The gout drive. And if I get the camera to focus in on it, you can see that it's a helical cut. You can see how the teeth are all kind of curving to the left there, if it'll focus. Not quite straight up and down. Alright, lubing her up and slipping her in. So you're not going crazy with it, just putting a little bit around the base there, because it is sitting on a bearing. I just want a little bit of cushion in between the ring gear and the bearing, so it's not, you know, just metal on metal. Alright, that part is through. Give it a couple little spins just to work everything around a little bit. Alright. Next step. What are we looking at here? We're slipping in the front differential. Then this other half, they're telling you to use lots of black grease, or just to use some black grease. I mean, really, the only thing you're greasing here is the ring and the pinion. I mean, it's riding on bearings. So, I mean, you're just taking care of those two parts. You don't need to pack this whole front differential full of grease. FYI. And I am rapidly approaching the 23-minute mark. Alright, I goobed the hell out of that. Goobed the hell out of the ring gear there. Or the pinion gear, my bad. And I'm going to slip in the differential and repeat the process. Oh, rapidly approaching 23 minutes. Alright, this is in here. And all goobed up and ready to go. Very smooth operation. Very smooth operator right there with the helical gear on the ring and pinion. Nice and smooth. Alright, so I'm going to put the cap on it real quick, and then we're going to call this a video and go to the next one. Might just go to the next one right now because I'm about to hit 23 minutes. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we're going to key one up here in just a couple seconds.